Nigeria's telecommunications sector added a remarkable 4.4 trillion naira to the economy in quarter three, reinforcing its position as one of the country's most resilient growth drivers. The surge was powered by rising data consumption, expanding digital services, and increased reliance on mobile connectivity for businesses and financial transactions. Well, despite economic pressures, including high energy costs and regulatory uncertainties, telcos, according to reports, were able to maintain strong performance through infrastructure upgrades, wider 4G coverage, and the early 5G rollout. And the sector's contribution highlights its critical role in Nigeria's digital transformation and also underscores its potential to anchor GDP growth. Now, analysts are saying that sustained reforms and investment-friendly policies could push telecom output even higher in coming quarters. So to help us understand this better, I'm joined by Tajudeen Ibrahim, Director, Research and Strategy at Chapel Hill Denham Securities. Thank you so much for coming around.
Thank you for having me on the show today.
Okay, so Mr. Ibrahim, it's quite interesting that we see a non-oil sector contribute this month. But then how did Nigeria's telecom sector manage to pull 4.4 trillion naira into the economy?
I think one thing we have to bear in mind is that this sector is in a recovery mode. When you look at the fact that within the past 2 to 3 years, the sector was really struggling with a regulatory headwind around the linkage of SIM cards to national identity number. So that resulted in the disconnection of about 60 million subscribers within 2023 and 2024. So given the fact that we have a situation where most of the telecoms operators have been able to reconnect back, some of their subscribers that were previously disconnected, we have seen the industry size in terms of the number of subscribers increase by 12% year on year to 173 million subscribers as at the end of Q3. So that's, in my mind, is a reflection of a remarkable recovery from the standpoint of the number of subscribers. So that is, largely speaking, what underpinned the 6.14% GDP growth recorded by the sector in the third quarter of the year. So we have a lot of product in the sector that are driving growth, but the bulk of the growth is being driven largely by data services that are offered by the telecommunications operators, given strong demand by subscribers.
Okay, so we are going to go on a break right now, Mr. Ibrahim. When we return, we'll look at the challenges. It's quite interesting that despite issues around data penetration, availability, and strong network, this sector is still able to pull these figures. But then when we go on a break and return, we'll pick the conversation from there. Don't go away. So on Business Edge, we're talking about how the telecoms sector actually pulled about 4.4 trillion naira into Nigeria's economy in quarter three. And I've been talking to Mr. Tajudeen Ibrahim, Director of Research and Strategy at Chapel Hill Denham Securities. And of course, he's been sharing his thoughts with us. So yes, we are just going to pick the conversation from the part where you talked about how resilient this particular sector has been. Around data, voice, fintech, infrastructure, and so many things that this particular sector, provides or presides on. We've also learned of issues around poor services, inadequate infrastructure, more underserved areas, most especially the rural areas, low internet penetration. How resilient is this sector despite inherent challenges?
I think the sector remains resilient. And when you look at it from the standpoint of the demand for the product offered by the sector, to start with, voice remains solid in terms of, demand, because we recognize the fact that the Nigerian market is now, fast becoming data-centric. But the reality is that the market is still, a voice market, particularly when you consider what we see in the rural areas of the country. So when you talk about, demand for product, we continue to see voice being resilient. And when you now look at data, which is, the most compelling product in that space currently, considering the fact that we have more Nigerians making demand for data services, largely for them to have internet connectivity and also to stay connected with their friends and loved ones on social media platforms. So we continue to see data demand being significantly strong. And as we speak, data is the largest contributor to the revenues generated by telecommunications companies in Nigeria. If you talk about MTN or you talk about Airtel, the numbers that you see in their financials is that data is now the largest contributor and driver of revenue. So that's an indication of how strong demand for data has been. And demand for data has also been supported by the affordability, or let me say, relative affordability of smartphones. We now have an improvement in the penetration of smartphones on the network of all of these operators in the country. So we continue to see that underpinning the growth of data demand and also data consumption. And when you look at fintech is another area where the telecommunications sector is improving and seeing solid growth, considering the fact that they currently are building the ecosystem to ensure that the entire sector is able to grow at a fast pace, particularly replicating what we have seen play out in Ghana, for instance. MTN Ghana is a solid player in the fintech space in Ghana, and also considering what we have seen in East Africa, where Safaricom is rapidly growing on the back of fintech offerings. So Nigeria here, we also have a solid footing, and we expect that fintech will accelerate rapidly in the coming years as operators are building the ecosystem to ensure that they have a solid footing. If you look at what we see in the public domain, you will agree with me that users, or let me say subscribers, borrow credits from all of these telecommunication providers, and combine that with high interest rate environment. It is also another reason that we have seen a remarkable improvement in their performance in the third quarter of this year and also on the year to date. Okay. Infrastructure is something they're investing on, and we expect investment in that space to improve further for 4G and for 5G as well.
Okay, so let me take you up a bit on the statement you made around how resilient this particular sector is and the improvement in its turnover. Of course, we could say that this 4.4 trillion naira would signal some sort of a true recovery in telecom investments, so to speak, revenue and all. But then you would recall that this year, tariff was increased by about 50%. Some other media channels even said it was about 65% increase in tariff in 2025 alone. So it's been argued that it's not really about resilience or infrastructure or whatever decisions that this particular sector has made that has transformed this fortune, so to speak, that it's about rising consumer costs, that consumers have had to pay more, and so the turnover increased. Does that argument hold it for you?
Not so much, because when you talk about telecommunications, there is need for you to make investment as you grow. I gave a couple of numbers earlier on this show when we began. We have, as we speak, over 173 million subscribers in the telecommunications sector. And when you have 173 million subscribers, it means that your connectivity has to be solid. And there is no way connectivity can be solid if you don't make huge investment in spectrum, you make huge investments in network expansion. And also, the investments we're talking about will not come unless you are profitable as a business. And for you to be profitable, your cost has to be protected. In protecting the cost, there is need, for you to ensure your pricing alongside how your peers across the world are pricing their products. And this market is a market where, we have not seen price increase for well over a decade or even 2 decades. So coming now for them to have 50% tariff increase, to my mind, is an indication of the need for the telecommunication operators to invest in their, infrastructure to ensure that the quality of service that they render to consumers, does not drop.
But then
that quality should be improved.
Yes, but then, Mr. Ibrahim, are you convinced? Are you sure that Nigerian consumers are actually getting better service quality in exchange for the sector's growing revenues?
Okay, so let me put it this way. If you look at what we currently are seeing in the sector, you most likely will agree with me that data services these days are a lot better than we had it previously. Let me say earlier this year, maybe in January or sometime last year. The only thing that has changed is that data services are now a lot more expensive than we had it previously. So we have a situation where in this country we have seen the exchange rate devalue significantly from around 400 to around 1,500 naira, 1,400 naira as we speak. That is a huge jump in the cost base of the telecommunications operator, because we see their financials and we engage with management. And from the conversations that we have with them, it became clear that the bulk of their cost, when we talk about connectivity cost is a major cost that is largely dominated in US dollars. And these operators had witnessed, just alongside every other Nigerian, huge devaluation of the currency, which means they had to part more with their naira without, increasing prices. Let me also, reiterate or mention it again that MTN Nigeria recorded losses for 2 consecutive years and even had the value of its shareholders wiped off into negative, largely because of the foreign currency devaluation impact on its business. So in a way to protect that, the government really allowed for 50% tariff increase. And one thing that MTN, for example, did very quickly is to accelerate investment in their network. So they were really expected to make the investment in the third and the final quarter of this year. But what they did was to front load that investment, because they made a commitment when they were implementing the tariff increase that the moment we increase tariff, we are going to accelerate investment in network, just so that, the quality of services does not drop. Even if it's, there's a glitch, it does not extend for too long. So I comfortably can say that, what we are seeing in terms of services from them is an improvement, particularly when you look at the quality of, the data that we get. It is just that it is a lot more expensive than previously because of the price increases implemented.
All right, so now that we're seeing collective gains and isolated losses, can the sector sustain this growth? We also look at, the persistent regulatory tensions and, of course, high taxes, maybe government policies that would definitely affect them.
Honestly, regulatory tension, to my mind, is something that the government really, really needs to avoid. Because when you, bring in regulatory headwind to a sector that is the second driver of your growth overall as a country, as an economy, what you are doing is that you are deliberately slowing down the growth of your economy, because this sector, apart from the agri sector that brought the largest increase in GDP expansion in the third quarter, the ICT sector was the second largest that brought, the expansion that we are talking about, in the country when you look at the entire economy. So I reckon that, the government by now should not allow any regulatory headwind to distort the growth trajectory of the telecommunications sector. If anything, I believe that the government should be investing and supporting the growth of the sector, because when you support the growth of the sector, you are indirectly also supporting the growth of the financial services sector, considering the fact that we have digitalization, which is one thing that, which is a major role that the ICT sector or the telecom sector is really playing in this regard. I spoke earlier about, fintech. We have USSD and all of those elements that are connected to the financial services sector. All of those things, to my mind, should, be encouraged in terms of growth trajectory and not, tamed in terms of how much they can grow as a sector.
Well, of course, the focus is on Nigeria's $1 trillion digital economy. So let's hope that more support will be given to this non-oil sector to see how it can contribute more to the entire economic ecosystem. Mr. Tajudeen Ibrahim, Director, Research and Strategy at Chapel Hill Denham, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us on the show.
Thank you for having me on the show.